Alien DNA is what I have. And alien DNA is all that can save us.
And alien DNA is all that can save us. And alien DNA is all that can save us.
Tad O'Malley has been making claims.
Claims about what?
You and everyone you know has a piece of DNA in your genome, put there without your knowing it.
Put there by whom?
Well, that's the question of the day.
This is an internet lunatic. You're not saying you believe him.
Just hold on, Agent Einstein. You're talking to a scientist.
Forgive me, Assistant Director. It may sound insensitive, but the suggestion is pure science fiction.
What I'm saying, Agent Einstein, is that the facts, as I understand them, cannot be discounted out of hand.
No one has the right or the ability to tamper with your DNA.
Unless we gave them that ability. You're right.
When you say they're tampering with our DNA, that they're able to shut down our immune systems by the addition of something to our DNA.
Yes, but I don't know how exactly.
Or how it's being triggered.
I don't know that either.
Or why it's happening now.
What can we possibly do?
We need to act quickly.
You were right about that.
Well, I was wrong about the science. I was wrong about what's causing it. Dead wrong, in fact.
But it's clearly a widespread failure of our immune systems.
Through gene tampering. A virus within a virus that was put there through the smallpox vaccine. It's what these men are calling the Spartan virus. We're not already in the dark.
We have to figure this out. What's wrong with the science?
Okay. The Spartan virus removes the adenosine deaminase gene from your DNA. Remove the ADA gene and your immune system will simply vanish.
Yeah, but I'm not getting sick.
It's only a matter of time.
Okay. So how does it work? How does the virus remove the ADA gene?
A process called CRISPR-Cas.
CRISPR-Cas9. RNA and a protein cutting genes at exact locations.
Exactly, but in this instance used as a weapon.
The ultimate weapon. The ability to depopulate the planet. To kill everyone but the chosen.
By tampering with their DNA.
So what are we looking at, Dr. Rubel? The scale and scope?
A scale we've never dreamed. A scope that quickly becomes global.
A massive contagion, then?
Not one contagion, but a variety of contagions. If the flu doesn't kill you, then something else will.
You're describing it as a fast-moving AIDS, without the HIV.
Our immune system's decimated by the same tampering to all our genomes.
Through gene editing.
Why do such a thing and lie about it? Our own government.
Your own government lies as a matter of course, as a matter of policy. The Tuskegee experiments on black men in the 30s, Henrietta Lacks.
What are they trying to do?
That's the missing piece.
What you just saw there was a video clip compilation of scenes from a 2016 X-Files episode that was circulating and went somewhat viral within the independent alternate media, or the truth movement, if you like, at the height of the COVID period. Now, the reason it attracted so much interest is that it eerily depicted events resembling what was unfolding at the time, and look, as time progresses, appear to be continuing to unfold in this present moment. While the clip touched on many conspiratorial aspects of a global New World Order agenda, it primarily focused on a pandemic scenario due to a vaccine-mediated pathogenic corruption of the human immune system via the genetic insertion of a deadly virus using CRISPR-Cas9 technology. The compiler of the clip, however, failed to include what I believe to be the most significant part of the episode. That is, the solution.
That's where I was mistaken. Alien DNA is what I have, and alien DNA is all that can save us.
What are we looking to do?
To amplify my DNA, using alien DNA to defeat the Spartan virus by creating a vaccine against it.
So how does your alien DNA protect you from this weapon?
I don't know. The alien DNA must code for something that targets the Cas9 protein. It must somehow deactivate the weapon. There it is. There it is. That's alien DNA we're looking at. It's okay, stay right there. Stay right there.
You're gonna need my help.
Yes, I am, Agent Einstein. I'm gonna need your help getting these IVs into all the other doctors here. They'll be able to make more of this and help the suffering.
If this actually works,
It's not gonna fail.
then I'll have alien DNA.
We should all hope to have it. It's the only hope we have. Mother, I'm here. We're gonna save your life.
Agent Miller is also in trouble.
I'll take care of Agent Miller. Right now, we're gonna get an IV into you, okay?
Now, what if this clip, as with many other TV shows, like, for example, The Simpsons, has chillingly given us prophetic insight into what the future holds? If so, it would possibly serve us well to heed the warning. In this presentation, I offer my thoughts regarding a potential scenario that could unfold in the not-too-distant future. Now, I want to stress that I am by no means dogmatic in this position, being fully aware of my human inability to know all things. It is, however, based on my research and observations, what I consider to be, look, at the very least, a very plausible scenario. Many of you will think that I've completely lost my mind. Some of you, I am preaching to the converted. Wherever you are located along this spectrum, I offer my thoughts to all of you, not to generate fear or anxiety, but to create awareness of possibilities so that should you see patterns emerge and scenarios unfold that seem to be related to the content matter of this presentation, you might be better equipped to make right decisions for your life in the future. In my estimation, there are 3 stages to this X-Files scenario. The first one is what I call the Trojan horse. That is that the Spartan virus in this episode is inserted into the human genome in the past via a life-saving smallpox vaccine. The masses accept willingly as a life-saving gift to humanity. Why wouldn't you accept it? The second stage is what I call the genocide. The initial dormant Spartan virus is activated somehow and begins to wipe out the population with absolutely no apparent solution in sight. The third and final stage, the saviour. Agent Scully discovers the solution and in doing so becomes the saviour of humanity. Her own alien corrupted DNA is used to develop a vaccine to neutralise the Spartan virus. Recipients of the virus have been rescued from certain death, but now have altered alien DNA. Humanity is rescued at the death knell, but at what cost? In considering this theory, it is of course speculation, but not totally uninformed or without merit, at least in my estimation. Is it possible that fiction is playing out before us and yet to be fully manifested? And if it is, look, I propose that we are currently in stage 1, where we have just witnessed the mass vaccination of the world's population with the COVID-19 vaccine, and currently standing on the precipice of stage 2. There is mounting anecdotal and scientific evidence that these vaccines are already breaking down people's immune systems, with excess death rates significantly higher all around the world.
We've been covering here the excess mortality during the pandemic years. A lot of researchers, a lot of politicians have been scratching their head and saying, why has excess mortality gone up in countries when this vaccine has been rolled out during COVID? It's supposed to prevent death, prevent hospitalization, severe hospitalization, but we're seeing excess mortalities go up. From the EU Parliament testimony there to other countries as well, we're seeing, and people are saying someone should do something about this, someone should look into it. Well, in Germany, researchers have, and now we have really the best paper to date on excess mortality. And this is it right here. Estimation of excess mortality in Germany during 2020 to 2022. So they looked at the reported deaths versus the statistically expected all-cause deaths. Results show that the observed number of deaths in 2020 was close to the expected number with respect to the empirical standard deviation. Approximately 4,000 excess deaths occurred. By contrast, in 2021, the observed number of deaths was 2 empirical standard deviations above the expected number, and even more than 4 times the empirical standard deviation in 2022. The mortality wave at the turn of the year from 2020 to 2021 is characterized by a strong age dependency, which follows the age-dependent risk of COVID-19. Excess mortality is higher in older people and is completely absent in the age groups below 30 years. This pattern is substantially changed from April 2021 onward, at the time when more and more people were vaccinated. This paper goes on in a more bold step, and it says this is about German surveillance. It says, given the temporal relationship between the increase in vaccinations and excess mortality, it seems surprising that a respective safety signal has not been detected in the pharmacovigilance by the Paul Ehrlich Institute, which is responsible for that's kind of like their CDC, which is responsible for the safety monitoring of drugs in Germany. A closer inspection of the methods used by the PEI to monitor possible deadly side effects of COVID-19 vaccinations reveals that a flawed safety analysis is used that will not indicate a safety signal, even if a vaccine causes extremely large numbers of unexpected deaths. And this leads them to say this, and this is really one of the takeaway sentences here. It says, from the perspective of pharmacovigilance, the simultaneous onset of excess mortality in vaccinations represents a safety signal.
One difference between the natural spike protein and the vaccine spike protein is this pseudouridine injection, where they basically mutate this spike protein so that it puts your toll-like receptors to sleep. Your toll-like receptors are the guardians of your immune system that detect cancer and ask your immune system to fight cancer. This vaccine was designed to put those guardians to sleep, and we've been saying we believe you're going to see a rise in cancer.
This new study as well out the same month. So we have these competing studies, these rails of ideas, and it's important to really let truth come to the surface here. IgG4 antibodies induced by repeated vaccination may generate immune intolerance to the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. And they go on to say this. It's an incredibly strong study. Emerging evidence suggests that the reported increase in IgG4 levels detected after repeated vaccination with the mRNA vaccines may not be a protective mechanism. Rather, it constitutes an immune tolerance mechanism to the spike protein that could promote unopposed SARS-CoV-2 infection and replication by suppressing natural antiviral responses. Number 2, specifically for this subject, mRNA inactivated vaccines temporarily impair interferon signaling, possibly causing immune suppression and leaving the individual in a vulnerable situation against any other pathogen. In addition, this immune suppression could allow the reactivation of latent viral, bacterial, or fungal infections, and might also allow the uncontrolled growth of cancer cells.
Wow.
It goes on to say this, number 4, the combined immune suppression produced by SARS-CoV-2 infection and further enhanced by vaccination could explain a plethora of autoimmune conditions such as cancers, reinfections, and deaths temporally associated with both. It is conceivable that the excess deaths reported in several highly COVID-19 vaccinated countries may be explained in part by this combined immunosuppressive effect.
Children in the UK were not vaccinated till later in 2021, and their excess deaths were actually going down because of lockdowns and school closures, which makes sense because the biggest cause of death in 1 through 14 age group is accidental. Well, we saw then that their excess deaths were starting to rise with the introduction of the vaccines. Now the 23 numbers are coming in, and it's gone from, the numbers are, let me just look, 16% in 2022 and 22% in 2023. And in 2021, it was actually minus 7% excess deaths. So, obviously I'm of the camp, it's the vaccine. So we're seeing a rise in excess deaths in the age group 1 through 14 post the implementation of the vaccine. We haven't put this out yet, but we run some correlations. Again, correlations aren't causation, but it's a 0.94 fit on the model. So 94% correlation to the vaccine rollout. And the percentages were, in 2020, it was minus 9% excess deaths in 1 through 14, the minus 7, and then it shot up to 16 in 22, and annualized numbers are 16 in 2022 and 22% annualized in 2023. If COVID was the cause of this rise in ages 1 through 14, why didn't it appear in 2020 and 2021 and only started post-vaccination? So these questions need to be asked. They need to be investigated, but the numbers that I reported in my book have gotten worse.
Having said that, I believe the real trigger into phase 2 is still to come. Is it possible that the COVID-19 vaccine is a vector of a sinister, deadly pathogen just like the Spartan virus and the X-Files, lying dormant until it is activated by something creating a pandemic on a scale never seen before, resulting in the deaths of millions, perhaps even billions of people worldwide? Is there another vaccine waiting in the wings, ready to save us from certain death? A vaccine that saves humanity via a significant alteration to the human genome. Let's explore this possibility, shall we?
My name is Philip Buchholz. I have a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology. I'm a cancer gene jock. Basically, I do cancer genomics research at the University of South Carolina. And what that means is that I'm kind of an expert on all the ways that the human genome can get futzed with during your lifetime. We're really good at detecting foreign pieces of DNA in places where they're not supposed to be. The Pfizer vaccine is contaminated with plasmid DNA. It's not just mRNA. It's got bits of DNA in it. This DNA is the DNA vector that was used as the template for the in vitro transcription reaction when they made the mRNA. I know this is true because I sequenced it in my own lab. The vials of Pfizer vaccine that were given out here in Columbia, one of my colleagues was in charge of that vaccination program in the College of Pharmacy, and for reasons that I still don't understand, he kept every single vial. So he had a whole freezer full of the empty vials. Well, the empty vials have a little tiny bit in the bottom of them. He gave them all to me, and I looked at them. We had 2 batches that were given out here in Columbia, and I checked these 2 batches, and I checked them by sequencing. And I sequenced all the DNA that was in the vaccine, and I can see what's in there. And it's surprising that there's any DNA in there, and you can kind of work out what it is and how it got there, and I'm kind of alarmed about the possible consequences of this. This DNA can and likely will integrate into the genomic DNA of cells that got transfected with the vaccine mix. This is just the way it works. We do this in the lab all the time. We take pieces of DNA, we mix them up with a lipid complex like the Pfizer vaccine is in. We pour it onto cells, and a lot of it gets into the cells, and a lot of it gets into the DNA of those cells, and it becomes a permanent fixture of the cell. It's not just a temporary thing. It is in that cell and all of its progeny from now on forevermore. Amen. This is a real hazard for genome modification of long-lived somatic cells, like stem cells. And it could cause, theoretically, this is all a theoretical concern, but it's pretty reasonable based on solid molecular biology, that it could cause a sustained autoimmune attack toward that tissue. It's also a very real theoretical risk of future cancer in some people. Depending on where in the genome this foreign piece of DNA lands, it can interrupt a tumor suppressor or activate an oncogene. And then the pieces of the DNA are of a very uniform and small size. That's evidence that they took efforts to try to chop it up. And
well, then they knew about it.
Yeah, they knew it. And they took efforts to chop it up. They just didn't get it all out.
But But
And-
having said that,
I guess that they just didn't think about the hazard for genome modification, because it's not all that expensive to add another process to get it out.
well, that's what I'm saying.
I can't
this
get
was
inside their
rushed-
mind.
This
I don't
was
know.
rushed too much, and that's why I'm saying these subsequent, we've heard testimony, these subsequent, variant, subsequent boosters, et cetera, are leading to maybe not scientific yet, but at least collateral knowledge that apparently these things are causing death and disability later on, and also the aging process, which you heard about a few minutes
There's a lot of suspicious associations.
For thousands of years, humans have bred horses in much the same gradual way nature does. But soon, they could actually be designed in the lab, along with other livestock, plants, and even humans. Because a new technology has made editing the genome almost as easy as using a word processor. Genes are made of DNA, long strings of 4 chemicals best known by their initials, A, G, C, and T. Together, they form the basis of all life on Earth. This new genome editing technique is so much faster, easier, and more accurate than anything that's come before that it's creating a new paradigm for biological research. It's called CRISPR, which is short for clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. Here's how it works. Scientists program a guide RNA on a protein called Cas9 with the address of the targeted gene. The guide RNA directs the Cas9 protein to cut both DNA strands precisely at the correct spot, like a molecular scalpel. A new section of DNA is added to the cell and edited into the original DNA sequence, which now incorporates the characteristics of both sequences. Biochemist Jennifer Doudna was one of the co-discoverers of the CRISPR technology.
It's going to enable a lot of science to be done that was impossible to do in the past.
The CRISPR technology is so precise that it can actually edit DNA down to a single letter, and multiple edits can be made at once. Changes in a genome that may previously have taken centuries can now be made in just a short time. This game-changing technology is one of the most powerful in the entire history of science, perhaps comparable to the splitting of the atom.
Thanks to the work of Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier, the human genome can be altered simply and precisely via a technology called CRISPR-Cas9. By adapting the molecular machinery found in the defense system of bacteria and an enzyme protein, CRISPR-Cas9 effectively acts like a pair of scissors, accurately cutting and replacing targeted sections of the DNA. The potential therapeutic benefits such as disease elimination understandably make this technology exciting and attractive. Human enhancement and even immortality are now spoken of in terms of near-future probability instead of science fiction fantasy.
From the last year, the one thing I've tried to put a priority on since I left the White House was, getting some exercise in. I think that there's a good probability that my generation is, hopefully with the advances in science, either the first generation to live forever or the last generation that's going to die. And so we need to keep ourselves in pretty good shape.
But people need to understand that this is real. This is possible, this is science. And therefore, I don't talk if immortality is possible, but when it will be possible for us, for complete human bodies. And this is the purpose of science and technology. And this is what is going to happen in the next 2 decades.
The process has been simplified to the degree that an everyday person can order a CRISPR-Cas9 DIY kit and experiment with genetic modification in their own homes.
We started to modularize the instructions. We were saying this little bit of A's, T's, G's, and C's is a switch to turn a gene on. So now we just call it a switch. and then we build another system that is, a reporter. And here, so we start to functionalize these code blocks, and now those code blocks have the genetic code encapsulated in them. You never have to look at them. And once you've done that, now you can start to assemble those code blocks and say, here's a switch, here's a sensor, here's a reporting device, and you just drag and drop the components to build a new circuit. So now it becomes accessible to someone who isn't a biologist. Now someone that is familiar with even wiring a simple electrical circuit can now build a simple biological circuit. And that's why we're starting to see kids, literally 7, 8 years old, starting to build their first biological constructs.
Josiah Zayner may no longer be a kid, though he may sometimes behave like one. But he is a real biohacker. He sells CRISPR kits on the internet to anyone who wants one. He once worked for NASA, but found it too bureaucratic. His living room has now been transformed into a packing division for biomedical items.
Hey everybody, we're here at the Odin in West Oakland, California. Come check out where CRISPR kits are being made. Our kits come with everything people need to do CRISPR experiments. My dream is that it becomes more open. People become more open to human beings changing their own genetics. As adults or as children, change the way we think about being human. Instead of just everybody being born with the genetics they have for their whole life, maybe we can start changing that up. And for interesting and fun stuff, everything doesn't have to be everybody, cure this disease, cure that disease, It's like, we get tattoos and stuff like that. Why can't we, grow a tail or grow wings or, how much scientific research has gone into growing a tail in human beings? Probably none. But a lot of people probably think that's pretty cool. Companies can do that if this technology opens up. Or growing wings. Who knows if that's even possible? Probably not. But nobody's trying, right?
Now, with any significant beneficial advance in technology, there is always an equally corresponding dark side. As the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. The extent to which this technology can be applied is largely unknown and potentially limitless. Will it be possible one day to genetically engineer a human to grow wings or fly or exhibit superhuman strength? And if so, it begs the question, at what point is a human no longer human? While the potential destructive consequences and ethical ramifications of this technology are discussed, it is quite apparent there will be very little to restrain the horse once it is bolted, so to speak. I suspect we are already beyond this point.
And when I hear CRISPR, it's one of those things that worries me in terms of the things that people who might not want to do good could potentially do. How do you, and anyone can jump in on this, how do you take this technology that can, it sounds like, do incredible things and prevent it from being used for harm? Deliberate harm.
I mean, you can't. But people will
Have a
do
good
what
night.
they will do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
While much of the world, fixated on the exciting possibilities this technology offers, races headlong towards a future where genetic engineering is the norm, I fear there is a real danger lurking in the dark that has eternal consequences that humanity is largely blinded to. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and the presence of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment ascendeth for ever and ever, and they have no rest day and night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Many consider the mark of the beast, as described in the book of Revelation, to be a physical mark, like a tattoo or even a chip inserted under the skin. What if the mark of the beast referenced in the book of Revelation is actually a genetic mark? A genetic change that alters the human genome to such a degree that the original DNA fingerprint of God is so utterly corrupted that it renders those who receive the mark no longer human and ultimately unredeemable. A change that alters a person's perspective, their morality, and even their very soul. For argument's sake, let's assume that the mark of the beast is a genetic mark. What might it look like? Could the answer lie in the triple helix? Early pioneers in DNA research, such as Rosalind Franklin, Maurice Wilkins, Linus Pauling, Francis Crick, and James Watson, vigorously sought to understand the structure of the DNA molecule. A triple-strand structure was proposed by Linus Pauling, which consisted of 3 helical sugar phosphate strands located in the centre of the structure, with the hydrogen bases pointing outwards. This attempt to explain the structure of DNA failed due to the negatively charged properties of the phosphate groups repelling each other and ultimately driving the structure apart.
This is Linus Pauling's failed attempt to predict the structure of DNA. The problem with his triple helix model is that the phosphates form the helical core, with the bases pointing outwards. This would be impossible under normal cellular conditions. Each phosphate group is negatively charged, and so many negative charges forced together would repel each other, literally driving the structure apart.
Crick and Watson also unsuccessfully explored the possibility of a triple-strand DNA prior to discovering the double helix model, which the scientific community adopted as the accepted model we know today.
Well, Francis, do you think we were lucky to have solved it? Or was it real brain work on our part?
Well, I guess we were certainly lucky. And of course, you give the impression in your book, Jim, we didn't really do too much thinking. But we were lucky, I think, for 2 reasons. We were thinking about the problem at the right time. And then the 2 of us, by collaborating, when one of us got on the wrong track, the other one could get us out of it. If I thought there were 3 chains at one stage, you were sure there were 2. If you thought that the phosphates had to be in the middle, then I would be the devil's advocate and say put them on the outside.
There's a little bit more to this story. A biophysicist named Dr. Bruce Fraser, better known for his contributions to the molecular structure of fibrous proteins such as wool, while working at Australia's CSIRO, also made some very interesting yet little-known contributions to the discussion regarding the structure of the DNA molecule. He also proposed a 3-strand molecule, but unlike Pauling, positioned the phosphate helices on the outside, very similar to Watson and Crick's double-strand model. I'm going to read an interview conducted with Dr. Fraser by Professor George Rogers and the Australian Academy of Science in 2008. Rogers, tell me about developing your model for DNA. Apart from the number of chains, it turned out to have been very similar to the final model that Crick and Watson developed in 1953. Fraser, when I finished my thesis, I got a Newfield Foundation Fellowship to continue working in the biophysics department, and Maurice Wilkins asked if I would think about possible models for DNA. Probably he asked me because I had learned a great deal from Bill Price about the distances between atoms, the angles they make and the forces which hold molecules together. I devised a model which had a helical structure with stacked bases. I reasoned that the charged phosphate groups would repel each other, and so they should be on the outside. This determined the orientation of the bases, and pointing inwards would be the hydrogen bonding groups. The reason I had 3 chains was that when I first started the investigation, I went to both Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins and said, how many chains are in the molecules? At the time, they were sure that there was 3, as was everyone else who had been working on DNA, including Linus Pauling, so I didn't bother to consider anything other than 3. Rogers, but you had everything there, apart from the chain number, whereas Linus Pauling made the critical mistake of putting the phosphates on the inside, in the middle. This was extraordinary for a chemist of his stature. Fraser, Yes, and he never recovered from that mistake. He was one of the leaders in chemical thought, yet he made this almost schoolboy mistake. I mean, who was I, however, a mere physicist, to question someone like Linus Pauling, right? Anyway, in 1952, after we'd arrived in Australia, Wilkins sent me a cable. He was aware that Crick and Watson had realised that the original model, which had also had the phosphate in the middle, was quite untenable. The thinking had taken a new twist after the King's group had gone up at their invitation to see the structure that had been developed in Cambridge. Rosalind Franklin was very supportive of the idea that the phosphates were on the outside, and in 1951 she told Crick and Watson in no uncertain terms that they'd got it all wrong. By 1952 they had a new model in which there was only 2 chains, and they'd put the phosphates on the outside and the bases on the inside, and so on. Wilkins' cable was asking me to write up the work that I'd done, because it was so close to what they had done, in order for the thinking at King's to get publicity at the same time. I sent him a draft manuscript with a couple of figures illustrating everything, but unfortunately he never published it. It was, however, mentioned in the actual 1953 paper, Molecular Structure of Nucleic Acids, a structure for deoxyribose nucleic acid by Watson and Crick. In the introduction they had this rather grudging acknowledgement. Another 3-strain structure has also been suggested by Fraser in the press. In his model, the phosphates are on the outside and the bases are on the inside, linked together by hydrogen bonds. The structure as described is rather ill-defined, and for this reason we shall not comment on it. Rogers: that comment is extraordinary, when their initial model was rubbish. Fraser: with 3 chains and the bases down the middle, yes. Also, I had gone to great lengths to try and work out standard patterns of bonding between the bases, which of course was the key to the final model. Although my model of DNA did not correctly describe the B form of duplex DNA, it came close to describing the triplex polynucleotide forms with the 3 chains that have since been characterised. First for RNA in 1957, and then as high energy state DNA, HDNA. It perhaps wasn't so wrong after all, and it was very nice of them to say so. Fraser's proposed triple-strand DNA model appears to have been the precursor of further scientific research to explore the therapeutic possibilities via the insertion of a 3rd strand of DNA into the existing duplex structure. Adding a 3rd strand of DNA offers the potential of disease eradication, gene expression regulation, and complete genome modification. Consider these articles. DNA triple helices, biological consequences and therapeutic potential. DNA structure is a critical element in determining its function. The DNA molecule is capable of adopting a variety of non-canonical structures, including 3-stranded, i.e. triplex structures, which will be the focus of this review. The ability to selectively modulate the activity of genes is a long-standing goal in molecular medicine. DNA triplex structures, either intermolecular triplexes formed by binding of exogenously applied oligonucleotide to a target duplex sequence, or naturally occurring intramolecular triplexes, HDNA, formed at endogenous mirror repeat sequences, present exploitable features that permit site-specific alteration of the genome. These structures can induce transcriptional repression and site-specific mutagenesis or recombination. Triplex-forming oligonucleotides, TFIs, can bind to duplex DNA in a sequence-specific fashion with high affinity and can be used to direct DNA-modifying agents to selected sequences. HDNA plays important roles in vivo and is inherently mutagenic and recombinogenic, such that the elements of the HDNA structure may be pharmacologically exploitable. In this review, we discuss the biological consequences of the therapeutic potential of triple helical DNA structures. We anticipate that the information provided will stimulate further investigations aimed towards improving DNA triplex-related gene targeting strategies for biotechnological and potential clinical applications. Triple helix, a new molecule for life by Peter E. Nielsen. Peptide nucleic acid, a synthetic hybrid of protein and DNA, could form the basis of a new class of drugs and of artificial life unlike anything found in nature. Scientists dream of synthesizing life that is utterly alien to this world, both to better understand the minimum components required for life, as part of the quest to uncover the essence of life and how life originated on Earth, and, frankly, to see if they can do it. That is, they hoped to put together a novel combination of molecules that can self-organise, metabolise, that is, make use of an energy source, grow, reproduce, and evolve. A discovery dating back to 1957, only 4 years after the discovery of the DNA double helix, provides another approach. That year, Gary Felsenfeld, Alexander Rich and David Davies, all then at the National Institute of Mental Health, created triplex healing structures in which a nucleic acid strand attaches itself in the major groove of a duplex nucleic acid molecule. The extra strand exploits a different kind of bonding of the base pairs, TA and CG, called Hoogsteen pairing. Inspired by this digital readout of the DNA double helix by groove binding, triple helix forming oligonucleotides, my group set out to synthesize a molecule that could do the same trick with fewer limitations. When we tried targeting duplex DNA with homoprimidine PNA, to our surprise the PNA did not bind in the DNA's major groove as planned. Instead, one PNA strand invaded the helix, displacing one of the DNA strands to form Watson-Crick bonds with its complement, and a second PNA strand formed Hoogsteen bonds to make a PNA-DNA PNDA triplex. And this article also. Scientist, a triple helix to cripple viruses by Dan Charles in 1991. A technique to insert a third strand of DNA into the double helix of specific genes could be used to throw a spanner into the works of the cell's machinery. The American scientists who developed this triple helix or triplex technique hoped to eventually cripple viruses in this way. The same approach could also inhibit the hormone progesterone and so terminate pregnancies. Ever since the discovery of the double helix, it has been known that there is room for a third strand of DNA, filling in a groove in the helix, says Michael Hogan of Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. But until recently, there was no way to predict which sequences of nucleotides, that is, the letters of the genetic alphabet, would form this third strand. There are many more scientific papers and articles that could be included, but as you can see, this field of science is clearly being pursued. And again, while the potential benefits are attractive, I wonder if the negative ramifications have been truly considered. Now, I can hear the question being asked: how, with the development and the integration of a third strand into our DNA structure and the subsequent alteration of the human genome, equate to the mark of the beast? There's a couple of theories which I want to present to you. Now, there was a theory proposed by a William Kinney in his book called A Beautiful Delusion, The Coming Antichrist. And it was regarding triple-strand DNA, the mark of the beast, and the 144,000 mentioned in the book of Revelation. Now, Kinney claims that Francis Crick was quoted in an interview with Reader's Digest that they had counted 140,000 genes in the composition of the human genome and expected to discover another 4,000. This would bring the total number of genes in the human genome to 144,000 genes. 72,000 genes from the father, 72,000 genes from the mother, two single-strand DNA at 72,000 genes per strand. Now, while I can't verify this interview or claim the existence of a Reader's Digest article with Dr. Crick, the figure of 144,000, or close to, has also been proposed by other scientists such as Dr. Randy Scott, who proposed an estimate of 140 to 143,000 genes. One of the leading private sector participants in US genome sequencing efforts says he has firm evidence that there may be more than 140,000 genes in the human genome, a significant increase over the conventional estimates closer to 100,000. Randall Scott, President and Chief Scientific Officer of the biotechnology company Insight Pharmaceuticals, suggested this new figure during a presentation on Monday, the 20th of September, to the annual sequencing conference organised in Miami, Florida by the Institute for Genomic Research, TIGR. Scott's new estimate of the total number of genes is based on an analysis of the prevalence in genes of CPG islands, short stretches of DNA that can be methylated and as such provide a mechanism for controlling gene expression. Insight researchers have sequenced just over half of the CPG islands and compared them to the finished sequences of genes now available. This has allowed us to estimate that over 53% of genes have CPG islands associated with them, says Scott. A further estimation that there are just over 75,000 CPG islands in total in the genome has led Scott and his team to predict a total of 142,634 genes. Now, Kinney goes on to propose that the 144,000 mentioned in Revelation is in reference to the total number of genes comprising of an uncorrupted human genome, those that still possessed the fingerprint of God, if you like. Interestingly, the final number of genes calculated at the completion of the Human Genome Project in 2003 totaled a considerably reduced number of just over 20,000 genes, which is now the consensus within the scientific community. It must, however, be noted that this count includes only genes that code for proteins, does not include non-protein coding genes, and DNA that at the time was considered junk DNA. Look, the debate continues, and I suspect that it is far from settled science. Interestingly, if the number 666 referenced in Revelation was calculated this way, 600 times 60 times 6, it would total 216,000. This begs a question: is the mark of the beast the insertion of a third strand of DNA into the human genome? It's an interesting theory, it's highly speculative, and it lacks a lot of reference material to support it. Despite this, and look, while I don't currently subscribe to it, at least to a lot of the specific information, I don't believe it should just be discarded out of hand. I have another theory. Now, this one evolved from the previous theory proposed by Kinney regarding the triplex DNA structure and its candidacy as the mark of the beast. One of the peculiar characteristics of the Watson-Crick duplex model as we know it today is the anti-parallel arrangement of the two strands which subsequently form what is known as the major groove. Interestingly, the major groove appears to be an empty space, so to speak, almost as if it were tailor-made to accommodate something, perhaps a third strand. As my mind wrestled with the implications and possibilities of the triplex structure, I was struck with the idea that perhaps we humans originally possessed a third strand of DNA. And, if that is the case, when did we lose it? As I gave this question some thought, the proposition entered my head that this strand was lost in the Garden of Eden at the fall of man. Now, presupposing a literal translation of the Bible as opposed to a metaphorical or symbolic perspective, when Adam and Eve violated the command issued by God not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they not only lost their spiritual state of innocence, they also lost their transcendent, immortal, bright, divine-like bodily state and transitioned to a mortal state of degradation, corruptibility, and ultimately physical death. A loss of the perfect reflection of their Creator. Now, I propose that the physical, biological consequence of this transition was the stripping of a strand of DNA, leaving only a remnant or a fingerprint, if you like, of our Creator and life source. I also propose that Lucifer, the light bearer, seeking to destroy the fingerprint of God and trying to recreate humanity in his image, is racing to fill the groove with his DNA, with his mark, the culmination of a war that has raged since the beginning, a seed war. The genesis of the seed war can be traced to the Garden of Eden. Lucifer, having been cast out of heaven, harbouring resentment and hatred after his rebellion attempts, sets his sights on God's apparent replacements, human beings. Now, starting with Eve, he commences a cunning plan to destroy humanity's relationship with God, not just by deceiving them into an act of disobedience, but by the corruption of the human genome. Now, there are a small but growing number of people who believe that the fall of man was not simply the act of eating a piece of forbidden fruit, but that it was indeed an act of sexual union between the serpent, Lucifer, and Eve. Adam also ate of the fruit and engaged in sexual union with Eve. The result was the birth of twins. Twins born of two fathers via what is known today as superfecundation, and thus began the corruption attempt of the human genome, the genesis of a seed war. This interpretation of Scripture is very controversial, and look, it's not widely held. I myself struggle to entertain this possibility, and while I still have not fully embraced it, but I've got to admit, the more I examine the evidence and wrestle with my cognitive dissonance, I'm forced to concede that it at least has merit. It becomes more compelling when one views human history, the big picture, in the context of a seed war between God and Lucifer. In considering the above, it is important to highlight the curse handed down to the serpent in the garden, in Genesis 3, where it says, "I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." In my estimation, verse 15 makes more sense through the lens of what's known as the serpent seed theory. Two bloodlines were established on that day, which would be at enmity with each other until the end of days. From this point, Lucifer's goal would be to destroy the seed of the woman, for by doing so, God's redemption plan for humanity would be destroyed with it. A view that is held by some is that the serpent seed bloodline has continued throughout history and is currently being manifested in the so-called global ruling elite controllers and royal families of today. Now, when I first heard David Icke refer to these people quite literally as lizard people or reptilians, I refuse to entertain the idea. However, once again, when thrust into the big context of the serpent seed theory and the seed war, it doesn't seem so outlandish anymore. Now look, time doesn't allow me to present all the evidence to support this theory. It's not the purpose of this presentation. However, I do encourage you to look deeper into this subject. Researchers like Zen Garcia have produced many books and videos examining this topic in great detail. A further major historical development in the seed war occurs prior to the Great Flood. In the book of Luke, verse 17:26, it states that the end of days will be like the days of Noah. Now, the immediate context, I think, refers to the speed of judgment. But look, there was far more going on back in the days of Noah that is not immediately recognised. Now let's go back to the days of Noah and let's see if we can join some dots.
Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men and bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them.
Was God really an unmerciful genocidal psychopath, like it appears, by wiping out so many people? Or was there far more going on that may give us insight into what lies ahead? To do this, I want to look at the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch paints a much more detailed picture of who the sons of God were. Enter the Watchers.
And it came to pass, when the sons of men had increased, and in those days there were born to them fair and beautiful daughters. And the angels, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them, and they said to one another, Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the children of men. Let us beget for ourselves children. And Semyaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear that you may not wish this deed to be done, that I alone will pay for this great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath and bind one another with curses, so not to alter this plan, but to carry out this plan effectively. Then they all swore together and all bound one another with curses. And they were in all 200, and they came down on Ardis, which is the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called the mountain Hermon, because on it they swore and bound one another with curses. And these are the names of their leaders: Semyaza, who is their leader, Yerakabah, Ramiel, Kakabiel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Daniel, Ezekiel, Baraquiel, Asael, Amaros, Batriel, Ananel, Zagiel, Samsiel, Sartiel, Turiel, Yomiel, and Araziel. These are the leaders of the 200 angels, and all of the others with them. And they took wives for themselves, and everyone chose for himself each one. And they began to go into them and were promiscuous with them. And they taught them charms and spells, and they showed them the cutting of roots and trees, and they became pregnant and bore large giants. And their height was 300 cubits. These devoured all the toil of men until men were unable to sustain them. And the giants turned against them in order to devour men. And they began to sin against the birds and against animals and against reptiles and against fish, and they devoured one another's flesh and drank blood from it. Then the earth complained about the lawless ones, and Azazel taught men to make swords and daggers and shields and breastplates, and he showed them the things after these and the making of them, bracelets and ornaments, and the art of making up of the eyes and beautifying the eyelids, and the most precious and choice stones and all kinds of coloured dyes. And the world was changed, and there was great impiety and much fornication, and they went astray, and all their ways became corrupt. And Mazarach taught all those who cast spells and cut roots, Amaros the release of spells, and Baraquiel astrologers, and Kakabiel portents, and Tamiel taught astrology, and Azradel taught the path of the moon. See then what Azazel has done, how he has taught all iniquity on the earth and revealed the eternal secrets which were made in heaven. And Semyaza has made known spells, he to whom you gave authority to rule those who are with him. And they went into the daughters of men together, lay with these women and became unclean, and revealed to them these sins. And the woman bore giants, and thereby the whole earth has been filled with blood and iniquity.
Total genetic corruption was manifested in the offspring of the sexual union of the Watchers with human women. But that was not all that happened. A significant volume of esoteric or hidden knowledge was passed on by the Watchers also. This appears to have facilitated human advancements in technology, warfare, transhumanism, and even chimeric hybridization of all creatures. Just about every aspect of the natural order as God had created was corrupted in some form. It appears that even the animals were not exempt from this corruption, and it's highly likely that human-animal hybrids were the result. Perhaps the mythical stories of minotaurs and centaurs and satyrs were not so mythical after all. That the legends of the gods and the demigods of Sumer, Egypt, Babylon, Greece and Rome, etc., etc., were more a retelling of and recreation of real events than mythical stories. Perhaps even the dinosaurs were the result of genetic corruption of the animal kingdom and were subsequently wiped out in the flood also. Something to consider. What is quite clear in these passages is that the human genome had been so utterly corrupted with fallen angel DNA that man no longer had any divine connection. They no longer had a soul and had become completely bereft of any sense of morality or goodness. Quote, the earth was full of blood and iniquity, unquote. If it was allowed to continue, the entire human race would have been eliminated along with any chance of human redemption. I would suggest that the Great Flood was actually a protective act of love rather than a psychopathic genocide. Babylonian King Nebuchadnezzar's prophetic dream in the book of Daniel provides another piece of the puzzle, linking the days of Noah with the end of days and was revealed to me only a relatively short time ago. And I must admit, when I became aware of it, it blew my mind a little bit. Now, previously I had read and studied the book of Daniel a number of times, and I'd never noticed this. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of a large statue composed of various metals and clay, which disturbed him, and which he sought the counsel of Daniel. Now, I'm going to read from the book of Daniel, and I'm going to start at Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream.
Now this is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and he has made you ruler over them. You are this head of gold. And after you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours, and then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, and like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in many pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men. But they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will not be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure.
Daniel is describing to the king the rising and falling of human kingdoms and empires, including his own, that will emerge in the future right up to the end of days. Now, there's a specific verse that I want to focus on in this particular passage. I'm wondering whether you noticed it, whether you saw it. And it's one short sentence, and it says this. Let's look at it again. They will mingle with the seed of men. I'll say it again. They will mingle with the seed of men. Now, there are two questions that need to be answered here. The first one is, who is they? And the second one is, what does it mean to mingle with the seed of men? I asked a friend who is fluent in Hebrew to translate this from the original. He believes that while the they is not explicitly clear, the best use of the language would suggest that the they refers to others or other than human. So, that lends the question, if not human, who could they be referencing? Could it be fallen angels or aliens perhaps? Could the mingling of the seed be referring to the insertion of a Luciferian third strand of DNA, creating a near world of angel-human hybrids, just like it was in the days of Noah? Now, according to Daniel, this mingling of the seed will fail. It will ultimately not achieve the goal of blissful immortal Godhead that humans will be deceived into pursuing. What makes the argument for a third strand even more compelling to me is the references within esoteric and New Age circles to the activation of a third strand of DNA to facilitate enlightenment, elevated consciousness, and even Godhead. An example of this can be found in the article called New DNA, New Consciousness, New Intelligence as Channeled, and it's written by a Princess Sharula Dax, and it goes something like this. For those who embrace the change and newness, they are coming into a new way of being. The third strand of DNA developing in your body makes you a Christ, a living, holy Trinity. In realizing yourself as the living Trinity, you will move beyond duality. The new amino acids will make it easier for your brain to fire off the new codes. Putting this in layman's terms, you will be growing new intelligence. The new amino acids will activate parts of your consciousness unused for a very, very long time. Now, you are aware that your scientists report to you that you use 6% of your physical capacity. Geniuses use about 8 to 10%. These changes within you will create programs that will allow you to activate more of who you really are. Stop and think about what mankind has done with just 6% of their consciousness. What you have created personally and as a collective on the planet. What could you do with the other 94% of your brain capacity? With the third strand DNA, you will access approximately 30% of your being. 30% is more than enough to make you a master, capable of feats beyond your wildest imagination. This includes not just cumulative powers in the brain, but it also includes all the powers accessible to your being. Telekinesis is an example. A person famous for his telekinetic abilities, for instance, is Uri Geller, a being able to bend spoons from afar and sometimes thousands at once. This being is perhaps using 10% of his being. 4% more of his brain capacity would create the ability within you. Again, imagine what you can do with 30% of your brain capacity. Is it also significant that the number 3 features heavily in secret societies, Masonic and other esoteric mystery religions and philosophies? Among many things, it represents divinity, perfection and completeness. The 33 degrees of Freemasonry represent the pinnacle of human enlightenment. This is visually represented in the 3-sided and 3-pointed pyramid. One of the meanings attributed to the pagan triquetra is spiritual enlightenment. Could all this be representative of the third strand, a vector of God consciousness? Further to all this, events and behaviour associated with the British royal family are also worth mentioning in the context of this conversation. King Charles has been pushing a New World Order agenda for some time now via strong advocacy for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, or Agenda 2030, and also his climate initiatives, which include the introduction of a new foundational document, the Terra Carta, a document that is laden with utilitarian global philosophies that will ultimately replace the Magna Carta and the values contained therein, which have been the bedrock of free, constitutionally protected democracies for centuries. It seems to me that Charles is committed to the formation of a one world government. Now that brings us to the Queen, and specifically Queen Elizabeth's lighting of the beacon ceremony during the Jubilee celebration. In this ceremony, the Queen pushes down on the Commonwealth nation's globe, as it was referred to in the ceremony. This triggered a procession of lights which, looking remarkably like a triplex DNA structure, extends along a grass area to a tree. Now this tree has also been shaped into what once again looks remarkably like a triplex DNA structure, complete with what appears to be stacked hydrogen bases extending up the trunk. Interestingly, this tree is called the Tree of Trees. Now, is this an almost blatant reference to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? The path to immortality, enlightenment and godhood? The perpetuation of the lie that Lucifer first uttered in the Garden of Eden thousands of years earlier? If this is not symbolic representation of altered human DNA and esoteric enlightenment, then what is? Let's get back to the mark. In considering whether the mark of the beast is a literal mark or tattoo or a genetic mark, perhaps we may be better served viewing it as a case of both and rather than either or. The King James translation describes the mark as in the arm or in the forehead. This observation becomes quite interesting when considering the recent advances in vaccine delivery and recording technology. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT as it is known by its shortened abbreviation, has developed a technology known as the microneedle patch as a method of delivering a vaccine payload easily and efficiently. As well as delivering the vaccine, it will also insert what is known as quantum dots for the purposes of recording and storing a record of the vaccination. These quantum dots are bioluminescent semiconducting nanocrystals that, when excited by infrared light, will glow, indicating the patient has been vaccinated. There have been further recent advancements in this technology whereby an ink containing RNA encodes for luciferase, a luminescent protein that is delivered with the vaccine payload. The conjugation of luciferase and the quantum dots results in a very efficient bioluminescent energy transfer from the luciferase to the quantum dots. Infrared light is no longer required to produce the glow. Interestingly, it would appear that the cells of the human body would actually produce the luciferase via the encoding RNA contained within the ink. Would this process be permanent, I wonder? Luciferase is described as a reporter marker for quantitating products or occurrences of certain biospecific reactions. It's effectively a mark, a bioluminescent mark indicating a biological function has taken place in the body. What makes the development even more compelling is that the name luciferase is derived from the Latin word Lucifer, meaning light bearer. You probably figured that out. The word mark referenced in the book of Revelation is translated from the original Greek word charagma, and it's described as a stamp or a sculptured figure, a graven mark, if you like. But it's also derived from another word, charax or charax, and this is described or defined as a point, a stake, if you like, or even a palisade or a rampart. Now take a look at the needles on the microneedle patch. They look remarkably like stakes, or even like maybe more like palisades. What do you reckon? So here we effectively have a light-emitting substance under the skin, named after Lucifer, and delivered via microneedles that look remarkably like the definition of the word mark described in the book of Revelation. A little bit coincidental, don't you think? Perhaps it is. The alien aspect of the X-Files scenario cannot be ignored either. The fact that the mainstream media, when reporting about the existence of extraterrestrial life, is no longer mocking the idea, but it's actually discussing it as a plausible possibility. Now this tells me there is something big coming. Are we about to witness the greatest disclosure in human history? I think it's no coincidence that former military whistleblowers are coming forward now and presenting evidence and conducting interviews, or that the Pentagon is releasing information regarding UFOs.
UFOs exist. The U.S. government found quite a number of them, and they are indeed of non-human origin. Those are the explosive allegations from a former intelligence officer tonight in a whistleblower complaint that the Inspector General is taking very seriously. 36-year-old Air Force veteran David Grush is exposing what he calls a top-secret military program that has reportedly found wreckage of fully intact UFOs. The government now calls them UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. For years, there have been whispers and rumors that the government had aircraft of non-human origin. This report is the first evidence it might be true. The Inspector General has called Grush's complaint urgent and credible. Tonight, we have a World Television exclusive interview with the whistleblower in which he claims we not only have the aircraft, but the government has been keeping much of its secret from Congress and from the public.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official intelligence representative at a high level from the US government is saying publicly, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
Southern Nevada is abuzz tonight with stories about the crash of an unknown object and the alleged sighting of strange creatures in the backyard of a Northwest Valley home.
Just before midnight on April 30th, skywatchers across several western states saw a bright fireball streak through the heavens. A police officer working in the Northwest Valley caught a glimpse of the colorful object on his body cam. At nearly the same time, a Ring camera in the area recorded a strange noise and what sounds like a crash. One family living in a ranch-style home had a much closer view of the object. Two brothers and their father were working on a vehicle in their yard when they caught a glimpse of a sparkly object as it came crashing down, then were hit by what they describe as a shock wave. One of the witnesses, a young man named Angel, has stated when the brothers looked into the yard where the object landed, that spot was obscured and blurry, as if by unknown form of camouflage. What they saw next prompted a frantic call to 911.
So there's two people or two subjects that are in your backyard?
Correct, and they're very large. They're like 8 foot, 9 feet, 10 foot. I don't know. They look like aliens to us. Big eyes. They have big eyes, like I can't explain it, and big mouth. They're shiny eyes, and they're not human. They're 100% they're not human.
We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction.
Have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Astonishing congressional testimony last week from retired military pilots. They say the government is hiding evidence of UFOs. It's an age-old question. Are we alone in the universe? And if not, is the government hiding the truth?
The sheer volume of abduction accounts and UFO and alien sightings is too compelling to ignore. The real question, however, is transitioning from do they exist to what are they and where do they come from? Many believe that we originated from an advanced alien race, such as the Anunnaki. A revelation would come as no surprise and even embraced, particularly if salvation from a deadly pathogen is offered by these entities, along with enlightenment and immortality. These creatures may be aliens, but I suggest to you that they are not the extraterrestrial beings from outer space that they will portray themselves to be, or that will be communicated to us that they will be. What I believe we are seeing with the UFOs is actually fallen angel technology. Now remember the hidden knowledge, the esoteric knowledge that the Watchers brought with them to Earth prior to the flood? I also believe that it will be the return of the Watchers themselves, a return of the gods of old. Now how could this possibly happen? Perhaps CERN may have a part to play in this.
Now, prophecy in numerous parts of the Bible refer to a coming day when portals will be opened and spiritual entities are going to pass through and come to the Earth. Collider, the LHC, is the largest single machine in the world, located on the border of France and Switzerland. Its stated purpose is to accelerate subatomic particles by the speed of light and force them to travel in a loop where they then collide. The secular media, rife with non-believers, scientists, atheists, and skeptics of the supernatural, have also all been in a buzz over the global discussion around CERN's seemingly paranormal associations. There is something more supernatural on the drawing board at CERN than what is being admitted. Even Adam Barker of Tech Bubble wrote of CERN a while back that with the LHC, CERN are expecting to find other dimensions and open portals to these dimensions. If you have the image of Stargate in your head right now, you're spot on. That's what he said. And then he went on to draw parallels to the biblical story of Jacob's ladder. Perhaps you remember the dream that the patriarch Jacob had as he was fleeing his brother Esau. Now this ladder, described in the first book of the Bible, describes something like a portal from heaven to earth through which God's angels, interdimensional and spiritual beings from another reality, were traveling. When Jacob wakes up, he refers to the location as a gate, much like today's trendy terms gateway or Stargate. one of CERN's goals is to recreate Jacob's Ladder, according to Barker, and to reopen a portal that is said to have existed between Earth, Mars, Venus, and Saturn when the planets were in alignment many years ago. But whether Jacob's Ladder really existed, he says, CERN are pretty sure that other dimensions do, and they're making it their goal to ensure that they open the portal for their use. Who knows? Now, Sergio Bertolucci, who is the official director for research and scientific computing at CERN, he was asked a while back about this extra-dimensional doorway by The Register, which is a London and New York operated science and technology journal. And he didn't hesitate with an enlightening response. He said, yes, out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it. And that sounds eerily similar to what Jesus said in John 1:51 when he said, truly, truly, I say unto you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now, prophecy in numerous parts of the Bible refer to a coming day when portals will be opened and spiritual entities are going to pass through and come to the earth. Now, if that's true, and if those verses are accepted for their literal meaning and not written off as some kind of poetic allegory, as some scholars have claimed, then the idea of CERN playing with gateways is a major concern. And if, as CERN claims, they're only out to explore space-time matter, particles, and the origin of our known universe and planets from exclusively a scientific or Darwinian-related perspective, if their agenda is unrelated to Bible prophecy entirely, then what is it with all this mystical symbolism that they knowingly are associating themselves with? Wouldn't it be more appropriate for them just to proudly display a polished statue of a particle or some artist depiction of the Big Bang instead of the statue of Shiva? So for those who have not yet heard about this controversial piece of art that CERN proudly exhibits between buildings 39 and 40 near the main building of their operation, it stands as really the most visible and celebrated imagery behind their work, Shiva. This is the Hindu god of destruction and a symbol of Shakti, or the life force. He is known very well as the destroyer. And in fact, in 2004, the government of India, which has had a long-standing friendship with leaders behind the CERN project even before the completion of the Large Hadron Collider, they gifted CERN with this bronze work of an art depicting Shiva as Nataraja, the lord or sometimes king of the dance. This dance that Shiva performs in the sculpture is the one that provides the source of the creation cycle in Hindu mythology, the preservation of all life in existence and the termination of all life in existence. The Rudra Tandava is a dance that especially displays Shiva's sadistic personality as he rains down the ultimate destruction upon a weary planet. The plaque at the side beside the statue, however, reads in part, hundreds of years ago, Indian artists created visual images of dancing Shivas in a beautiful series of bronzes. In our time, physicists have used the most advanced technology to portray the patterns of the cosmic dance. The metaphor of the cosmic dance thus unifies ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics. So right there out in the open for all to see is a direct correlation between the Hindu perception of Shiva hundreds of years ago, which is the concept of destroyer that I explained a moment ago, and our time, unifying, quote, ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics. Additionally, and perhaps even more important, there's a significant section of CERN that is built upon the Saint Genus Poëli, which is a commune in Ain, a department of France. In Roman times, the Saint Genus Poëli was called Apaliacum. The name Poëli comes from the Latin Apaliacum with the Latin suffix lacum, which denoted possession. But the town and a temple were dedicated there in ancient times to Apollyon, the destroyer, the Shiva Horus, if you will. Apollyon is also the angel of the bottomless pit, referred to in Revelation 9:11. Of course, I can only speculate, but I note the connection between Nimrod, Apollo, and Abaddon, Apollyon at CERN, and the history of the region are all highly curious. Apollo was worshipped by the Romans of that area, as well as the Greeks and in central France. Apollo was equated with the Celtic god Atep Omerus. These two characters were combined to create Apollo Atep Omerus, which can be translated as great horseman or possessing a great horse. In the Celtic belief, horses were closely related to the sun. The interesting thing to note is the connection between this idea of Apollo being associated with horses in France, where part of the LHC and CERN resides, and what the book of Revelation states about Abaddon, where it says, "And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon." End quote. I also note that Revelation chapter 9, after describing how these devil worshippers will be judged during the Great Tribulation period, it ends in verse 21 saying, "Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries," which is the Greek pharmakia, "nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts." Now, pharmakia is the word that describes the ancient occultic effort to use mind-expanding drugs during rituals in order to open a doorway for making contact with unseen supernatural entities. So, given these descriptions, is it possible that CERN will have something to do with the opening of the bottomless pit described in Revelation 9?
L.A. Marzulli, when summarising human history, put it simply but emphatically when he said, "It's a seed war, it's a seed war, it's a seed war." Lucifer's agenda has been a long-suffering plan to ascend to the throne of God and destroy humanity's divine connection to the Creator through the corruption of the human genome. I believe this seed war is about to manifest itself in a big way. Perhaps this time it will be via a vaccine that facilitates the insertion of a third strand of DNA. This will be DNA, I believe, from fallen angels, aliens, or the Antichrist, or Lucifer himself. A genetic and physical mark that promises immortality, illumination, and ascension to a godlike state. But once received, will render a person void of their humanity and their divine connection. They will effectively be transformed into soulless modern-day Nephilim. It's not insignificant that Lucifer's plan begins and ends with the same subtle lie. Ye shall be as gods. Just as Adam and Eve succumbed to the temptation of godlike status back then, so too many will succumb to the same temptation in the future. And just as God laid out the path of life back then, so too has he laid out the path of life for humanity now. And just as Adam and Eve, through their choice, left their first estate to enter a mortal fallen state, so too is humanity required to leave their current fallen estate to reclaim their uncorrupted divine connection and enter eternal life. This is the heart of God's plan of redemption, the essence of the gospel which Jesus Christ modelled perfectly. Now, despite being offered the lie on multiple occasions, Jesus stayed true to his calling, all the way through to death. He was offered temporal power and the kingdoms of the world by Satan during his temptation in the desert. He resisted. He was again offered temporal power as the masses were pushing for him to lead a rebellion against the occupying Roman Empire. He refused. When under duress in the Garden of Gethsemane, there is every indication that he was wrestling with the idea of avoiding the cross and exercising temporal power to do so. Despite this, he followed the will of his Father to the cross and was subsequently resurrected to an exalted or glorified body, if you like. Jesus frequently taught that one must die to gain eternal life. For example, Matthew 16:24, Jesus said unto his disciples, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. For what is a man profited if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" In the context of the bigger picture, I believe there's literal truth to what Jesus was teaching. That when Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me," he meant it. There must be a willingness to lose everything that this mortal life has to offer in order to gain real eternal life, not the counterfeit that will be offered. The ultimate test of this faith will come when the mark of the beast is offered, promising so much. Freedom from disease, biological enhancement, immortality, enlightenment, and the hubris of godlikeness. And if the allurement of being a god does not sway people to accept the mark, then the fear of banishment, loss of security, and even death will. The days of revelation are possibly at our doorstep, and with technology advancing at such a rapid rate, we are at the threshold of a major change to not only how we live, but to what it means to be human. The emergence of transhumanism, posthumanism, and the fourth industrial revolution from futuristic philosophies to imminent realities mean that we are on the threshold of the complete transformation of the human species to a state that is almost unrecognisable from the original blueprint of the divine creator of all things. The great deception is unfolding before our very eyes, and there will be choices presented to us that will have eternal consequences. Quite literally, a matter of eternal life and death. The COVID pandemic, or scandemic as I like to call it, gave us insight into our future where people were corralled into making sacrificial decisions. Get vaccinated or you lose your job. Get vaccinated or you cannot visit loved ones in the hospital. Get vaccinated or you can't travel. Get vaccinated or you cannot receive hospital treatment. This appears to be a precursor to the mark of the beast described in Revelation, a trial run if you like. As we walk further into the future, this decision will be much more difficult and will demand a far greater sacrifice. If the X-Files scenario is indeed a prophetic glimpse of the future, the choice will be this: get vaccinated to save your life, get vaccinated to eradicate disease, get vaccinated to become enhanced, get vaccinated to live forever, get vaccinated to be enlightened, get vaccinated or you will die. You see, only the enlightened will be allowed to live in the new Luciferian utopia. What choice would you make? Would you be willing to let go of your attachment to this world, to this life, or would the temptation to preserve and extend your mortal existence, along with other trappings offered, be too compelling? Matthew 7 says this, verse 13, "Enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." Now there's a reason why the consequences of taking this mark are so serious, why they're so dire. It will effectively transform you into a hybrid, a Nephilim, as in the days of Noah. A transformation that is irreversible and ultimately renders you soulless and unredeemable. If you're watching this video, it's highly likely that you are a fellow human and therefore will be a target of this seed war. You are a target of this seed war. This will affect you at some stage, and there will be a choice to make in the perhaps not too distant future. The question you have to ask is, what will yours be?